Sorry about that earlier today. That is weird that happened. I don't understand. I upload all that video content and the first video get to 7 minutes. Trolls. Now again, like I said, when that video got knocked down, I hope it got re-put up. Clear up a few things. Number one, I get frustrated. I really do get frustrated, and this entire concept of mine, this whole thing is oppositional resistance art. That's what this whole thing is about. This is about repression. My YouTube rants, my book, Ballad of Cement, my big broader novel. I think this is a beautiful time that through this pain, Sweeter the Uses of Adversity, we could come together as Russia, Japan, Germany, us, as I call it, the nuclear triangle, the nuclear vagina of Russia, Japan, the United States. And I can get into the very inception, which I do in my Nuclear Punks versus Nuclear Punks, capital P-U, on the birth and where this thing evolves from and how it all comes about. Because when that bomb was dropped, you know, let's remember the inception of the Japanese when they bombed Pearl Harbor. Let's remember who was head of the Fed was the man running a lot of these shows right out of that mountain, Mariner Eccles, when Truman dropped the freaking bomb. And that's what it started, the Tsar bomb with Sakharov and the evil, evil Cold War, you know. And then the whole inception with Hitler, as I get into Black Hand and the Browning gun in my town. I mean, I'll draw it all full circle in my big broader novel. Chapter 11, the incorporation of the American dream. As we can all come together, as we were propaganda on both sides, as Russians and as Americans. I look back, we were so hardcore propaganda here. We were so hard, as they were. This is a beautiful time that we can avoid the 1% and all the elitists and people via YouTube. As I said, the Pussy Riot thing is so powerful, not from the subject matter. Their protest wasn't even that dramatic. It's the genre, it's the venue. As reading this book online, it's the genre, it's the venue. Post-ignorance is resistance art. As I like to say, well, you know my rant on what the definition post-ignorance, the start of my book, the end of my book. After WW2 until 1980, shift in philosophy, the country had no health care programs for two reasons. One, like athletes, American doctors made about 3 to 4 times the average American worker. Two, the country was at full employment and the labor unions, in the popular opinion, demanded good health care from their employer. American government had no need to get in health care debate. They did not have to. American industry and American owners provided very good health care coverage for everyone. All workers, if they did not, the American worker would simply walk down the street to the next employer and go to work. The industries of our times had very good health benefits, not out of the kindness of their hearts, because they had to. It was the same as why do they do things today? Because they can. Industry's greed has not changed. The human subset of exploiters has not changed. What has changed is the fact that the average American allows it to happen now. When all through the from 1945 to 1980, the great progressive area, they would have never stood for it. Industry cutting them down like they have. It is American popular opinion in their need to use politics as religion. In the early 80s, the Reagan team had come up with the notion, the idea of turning the GOP into the moral majority. They started using sex and God as a platform and drag. With underneath this wig was a very sick idealism of fuck the masses. They have no idea what's good for them, but we do. It worked. Americans began in 1980 to vote against their own economic interests. They had put their so-called moral interests in front of their economic interests, and it had become not the economy, stupid, James Carville, but it is our religion, stupid. It is no accident that 85% of people who attend church on a regular basis vote for the Republican in general elections. Corporations have smashed wages for over 30 years. A big part of individual wages had been for decades as families or individual health benefits. They took those away. It is all wealth redistribution to the very top of the corporate leaders, CEOs, and board members. They had worked in concert with Wall Street to smash the American worker. In 1994, they took a whole new level. They were successful in collating this religious faithful voters to believing their protectionism was a bad, immoral, ugly thing, when in reality is the moral good thing. Think about it. If we had spent over 50 years overcoming child labor and horrific work conditions and slave wages, not with a vote, but with force. The labor movements of the 30s and the 40s and the 50s were not pretty. The Irish Italians had organized. It spread across this country with blood. It had created the strongest middle class in the history from 1945 to 1980. They were protectionists, protecting their jobs, their families, their health benefits. Do the math. There are 7 billion people on Earth. There are 6.2 billion in India and China alone. There are 300 million in the United States. The average American worker makes about $15 per hour, and the average world worker makes less than 30 cents an hour. So without protection, in the reality, our working class will slowly move into line with the average working class lifestyle. It is pure, simple common sense and economics. With no protection, we blend into the billions as much smaller number as available workers. The GOP in 1994 approved NAFTA, the working class greatest nightmare. Oh well, we have the man who claimed to be the next John Kennedy as president. He will surely veto this anti-democratic, anti-progressive legislation. Well, as they say, the rest is history. He did not veto it. He was no John Kennedy. John Kennedy slept with Marilyn Monroe. Bill Clinton slept with Monica Lewinsky, or whatever that sex was. And yeah, I know, Freudian again. I take that as a compliment. I was set in place, the snowball, and had slowly been rolling for 14 years. It now went straight downhill fast. Every piece of environmental working class law and idealism built over many decades was gone, all of it, straight to China. No environmental laws there, no labor laws there. Corporate America could do whatever they wanted. The very same thing we fought Korea and Vietnam over, stalking communist China's power and expansion. The hundreds of thousands of men and women who died for it was all backdoored, and the American popular opinion allows it. Why? Because they have been indoctrinated into the right religious tent. It was no common sense of politics. It was whatever they would tell us. We will support it, all of it, to the death, no matter what our religion. We believe, we believe. It worked. I do not even believe the corporate powers believe it could be so easy and extreme. How did they get so-called Democrat to veto the NAFTA? Every Democratic leader for a century would roll over. In the reality, as I said before, when it comes to the economy, we had 5 consecutive Republicans, and Clinton was as Republican as it gets. He was the most Republican of the 5 in regard to Wall Street corporations. He is their favorite president, right ahead of W, and of course their God himself, Reagan. Reagan is the GOP as Joseph Smith was to the Mormons, and Clinton was to the GOP as Brigham Young was to the Mormons. Corporate America now had the ability to whatever they wanted with the support of the neo-ignorant masses. The leaders of the GOP, the said NAFTA, thing is good, and that the protection of him is like being an anarchist, when common sense is it will make me and my family poor. That's not what they said, and besides, the protectionist people want the fags to get married. That's what they're thinking. That's the GOP. That's the GOP. They turned into racists. They turned into racists against homosexuality. They turned into racists against skin color, racists against women, and take away our guns. They're going to take our guns and let them fags get married. Let's get some more hairspray on. I'm voting for the right. Besides, they have a real smart guy, that Greenspan guy, when you don't even know what a word he fucking said. And the American worker is to complete with the global worker. We hear all the time, the American worker is the greatest worker in the world. How can an American worker be the greatest worker in the world if he can't? If he is making the world mean wage. He cannot. It is an impossible equation. The world mean wage is 65 cents an hour. Remember, it is a huge fight with the GOP to even raise minimum wage to $7.25 per hour, with no overtime, with no benefits, with the right to fire any worker for any reason. How far are we willing to go in regard to smashing the working class in the name of Wall Street and the heads of corporations? We allowing with a wink and a eye 20 million illegal so-called workers in, and allowing employers not to pay taxes on their so-called illegal workers and cheat them and exploit them right in the face of our laws, simply turn our heads. It is the exploiter who is the problem, not the exploited, and we do not care. We allow them to pay cash and bypass all employment laws. Why the honest businessman or woman dies at the hands of the dishonest businessman or woman. We allow our grocery and our hardware stores to use computers to replace humans. $7.25 an hour is not small enough. That does it. Where does it end? In a third world country whose entire economy is based around its military. Sound like somewhere you know? I hear it all the time. We need clean energy jobs to bring back America. All right, let's say you own a plant. Let's say Ohio's making windmills. What is to stop a corporation from making the same windmill in China for 1/10 of the cost? Nothing. It will not work. It cannot work. Remember, I wrote this over 2 years ago. All right, let's say you have a company installing windmills. Let's say Utah. You have 10 employees. You're paying a fair wage and you're paying employment taxes so we could pay for our great war machine. that has become our economy. And then all of a sudden, a fat, hair-sprayed, lazy, never worked a day in his life decides to go into the same business as you, put up windmills. He goes over to the local shelter and puts up the word, I'm paying cash for 10 workers or 20. He picks them up the next day, promises them $8 an hour. He pays them $3 an hour. He begins to underbid you on every job. So you call the state and the feds. They do nothing. So you say, well, the consumer will know who this guy is and not experience his cheating the system. They won't hire him. Want to bet on that one? They lay the cheapest bid every time. I have been in this business for 35 years. Experience means nothing. The means nothing. The IRS, you would think, would step in. They're claiming wages on the returns of the IRS had a legal ability to back 10 years. They do nothing. The mortgage broker used fraud. People called the state and the feds. They do nothing. It has become a country of scammers and cheaters. This is our economy, with the game of no rules, no policies to enforce the rules. The game becomes a Ponzi scheme of corruption, and we'll all pay, every last one of us pays, including our unborn children. We are the consumer, and it is our fault. As Adam Smith wrote, the skill will become so refined we could set the market price. Well, there is one flaw in that economic practice. What if there are two sets of rules, one for the honest businessman and the other the dishonest businessman? Not to mention an endless sea of very hungry workers that can be paid in very small amounts of cash. The population who says this does not happen of a large scale is totally out of the reality of this fact. It does happen on a very large scale. I have lived it for 15 years now. There is a $13 per hour difference. That is the number that it costs between the payer of the rules and the non-players of the rules. I broke down this and quantified it as $13 an hour difference by playing by the rules and not by playing by the rules. $13 per hour per employee. And you are the problem. You as the person who shops at Walmart, the person who fucks your own people. You are our community, you are our family, you are our unborn children, because you employ a contractor to build your house or mow your lawn or fix your car. You know who you are full well. It is not employing a tax-paying, spending in our economy. You hire the exploiter because you care about yourself in a now and have no concept of the future. Well, the future is now. It is known. It is here. You asked for it, you got it. If I hear one more moron say that debt will affect the future is now. The effect is now. Americans are neo-ignorant. They do not understand their own plight. It is pathetic. Our military has become our economy. Ike was right. In 1961, President Eisenhower had been out of office for just a very short few months. He had seen the greatest war machine in world history be organized from the roots, the farm boys' roots. He had been massive death and evil, and he had, like all Americans, stared in the face of the brick on the brink, and breathed the air of the relief. He watched his country rebuild and prosper and rejoice. He watched Eccles and Truman and the wealth of this country set up. The country had pride, not from winning, from overcoming. This country, as a popular opinion, had it. Knew hunger, knew pain, knew how it felt to be cold, and knew what it was like to watch their own children starve. They had souls, they had cared about each other. They survived the 1930s. They hated the sick wealth that had created the pain. They were the greatest generation, but their kids became baby boomers, the fat, lazy, stupid me generation. They could give a fuck about anyone but themselves. We went from the greatest generation to the worst. Eisenhower's infamous speech talked about the real fear he had in the military becoming so large and industrialized that it would have to be its own spirit and agenda and would spill into every aspect of American life. Well, every single word he said is right here, right now. Our military is massive and is the biggest employer of our economy by far. Think about the implications of the factual reality. We had a bad economy because of our jobs are so cheap. Labor conditions, lands, and the incentive to join the military gets larger and larger, and the incentive to use military gets larger and larger. Remember just one decade ago, the smaller, leaner military? What happened? Oh yeah, the blowjob from a chubby chick, that theft of the presidential election, the media flips from media to entertainment. The souls of Americans are self-indulged in 3-month patterns. They cannot think outside the triangle. Their mind and their lives have become a Ponzi scheme, a triangle, an Amway busload of clowns. They believe the top trickles down to the top pyramid scheme. It trickles down. It is believed someday they might be on one trickle down on the rest. And then they want that why. My father had hundreds of one-liners, but my favorite he had was unbelievable wit, was one of his favorites. Show me someone who is worried about their small self-indulged things, and I will show you someone who will never experience the big things. Americans do not think the big things. They think with their tiny little selves and their lawn and their freshly washed car. They do not think about the fact they just have jailed themselves with debt, or they have consumed staring at the worthless dollars and gold they miss life. They use a contractor or a restaurant or a banker who does not employ their family or their friends or their neighborhoods or their community. They think I've got my lawn mowed for $10, another of my father's great one-liners. Just look at who is mowing their lawn, then decide if you want to do business with them. If you are too lazy to mow your own lawn, they are too lazy to pay anyone fairly. You want to know everything about anyone, look who mows and how they mow their lawn. It is so true. We have become a lazy, service-based economy. Service-based. Wow. What a marketing term the NAFTA freaks drained up there. A person will spend $100 a month to have one mow his lawn, and they spend $60 a month to go to the gym. Service-based economy. What are they all going to do? Sell shirts to each other? A service-based economy can only work with a population that has disposable income, good jobs. A service-based economy in correlation with a manufacturing NAFTA economy was a disaster from its inception. It cannot work. It created the housing bubble as good-paying jobs. We're turning the middle-class worker into a lower-class worker, less disposable income. So the Fed needed to find a way. Greenspan, the so-called free market guy, come up with a very simple economic tool that is very easy to implement and works the very short term and works fast. Simply inflate your way out. That is exactly why he was lowering when he should have been raising. The interest rate from 1998 to 2003 should have been raised at least 9%. The Fed's funds rate should have been at least. Instead, they lowered why the economists on earth knows the results of lowering interest rates in the face of inflation. It has to be taboo for centuries. It's called hyperinflation. It's basic economics 101. Baron Eccles would roll on his grave. We have inflation raging in our heads, so instead of raising like Volcker did to create the prosperity and the power of the dollar through the 90s, through Volcker's terms, through Eccles' terms, we went to fairy tale Ayn Rand Fairy Island. The fake free market guy, which was no free market guy, he's slashing rates when they should have been raising. You slash rates in inflationary times, you cause hyperinflation. From 2000 to 2006, we had hyperinflation. It's that simple. Hyperinflation, and that's exactly what we got, hyperinflation. What is their byproduct that would keep this unsustainable ship from sinking for a few years? The ability to use our house like a credit card. The money supply is traced in this country at least 5 categories by the Fed. M1, M2, M3, M4, M5, and I think this needs to be said. Since I wrote this 2 years ago, M3 has been taken away from them. I'll get into that reason. They took away M3. I mean, they've lost complete track. And others. A phenomenal has been building in the 90s, and Greenspan knew it all well. He wrote about it, and he did nothing about it. Check kiting has been illegal for decades in the country. So we all know how the game is played. People used to go to jail for it. Credit card kiting was getting out of control, and the Fed was losing control of the money slide. So they did not stop it. They threw gasoline on it. A certain politician our town went to college with, who I am not to name, spoke one day at the university I was attending. He was a finance major from Dr. Cooley. So I know him, and I knew him better. He said, "Oh, I got my start flipping houses. I went on Mormon mission to Mexico, and I could speak Spanish, a very common scam in Utah. I started with a just credit card and bought my first home, and I sold it to the Spanish community. Then I bought 2 more on a credit card. After the speech, I went up to him, had a little our ex-mayor talk. I said, you do not know what you are doing is against federal law. What using a credit card to purchase a house in your method is called double debting is illegal, which it is illegal. Was then, of course, white collar crime's legal. They don't enforce it. You are running for office right now? Don't give his speech again. It is illegal. But again, like most white collar crime in America, it is turning the other yellow ribbon cheek. As the inflation way out was going, the dollar was eroding fast, very fast. Pete, repeat. I go Mets. I know. Scammers come out of the cracks like ants. Every loser I went to college with in the 90s was a mortgage broker. They'd quit this building right here and go down. I'd get on down to the slacker buildings. Cooley'd kick them out of their class. They'd go down there and get them a social science grad. So get on down there to the slacker building. I was thinking, what a dead end. It was on home prices, nearly doubled in every first year. The dollar's value was crashed. The year went from 80 cents to $1.60. It was just a very short year's inflation was hyper as it gets. Gold went up 400% in 3 years. Oil went up 600% in 2 years. Every wannabe farmer in our area started raising hay and grain. Ag resources went up like everything else, 200% in 2 years. As the inflated numbers went up, corporation welfare farmers started using debt as they did the working class and speculators. Their lifestyles adjusted. They disposable income went from the inflated home. They were spending the service-based fallacy had covered. The markets were staying even, so it seemed the average investor or fund manager, but in reality the markets were in a free fall, an 8-year free fall from 2000 to 2008. The markets lost 80% of their true value. I will spell it out to you in folks language because America is too stupid, God forbid, to have someone talk over their neo-ignorant heads in 6th grade ideas. In 2000 you had the most common portfolio in America, 33% Dow stocks, 33% S&P, 33% NASDAQ. By 2008, the Bush years, I like to call the Greenspan and the Rumsfeld years. I'm still waiting for Rumsfeld to unzip his suit and McNamara to walk out. I know. Over the 8 years in the hard number, the portfolio has lost 35% of its value. Now let's do what we have to do in relation to wealth. We have to put the value of our currency in the portfolio. If you had $100,000 in 2000, how much can you buy with the $100,000 now? Most good economists use gold as weight or oil. I have shown before taking a little future and incorporating a few more variables in my matrix. But if you use the rationale, and the most important by far, the dollar against the euro, the inflation intention to the euro saved all economists a lot of work, the invention. They use it to build as European currency basket. The euro does it for us. Weighted the average said portfolio against the euro. We have lost over 80%. You can weight against anything you could think of. All you have to do is to build in your mind what could have that 100,000 bought in 2000. How much gold, how much oil, how much grain, how much house, how much real estate, how much food, how much car, how much education, how much happiness, how much love. How much does it buy now is what inflation or deflation is. Deflation is a good thing for the average American. It strengthens your spending power. So the so-called asset class is which by default many of us are the asset class via our leveraged up house. It hurts us in the context of our house. Our big fat credit card is getting worthless. But if you are in the on the non-asset class, your dollars go further. Chapter 12, U.S. boycott of the 1980 Olympics for what? The invasion of Afghanistan.